Hello, ThinkyCon. I'm really happy to be here. I love Thinky games. I love puzzles, and I'm going to tell you all about my latest obsession with crosswords. But before I start with my talk, in case you don't know me, I'm Clara Fernandez-Vara. I'm associate arts professor at the NYU Game Center. On the one hand, I'm an academic. That was my training. I wrote a very popular textbook in the field of game studies, Introduction to Game Analysis. But I'm also a narrative designer and game writer. And in the beginning of my career in games, I wrote my dissertation on adventure games. I have written about adventure games. I had made adventure games. I have designed many puzzles and thinky games myself. So what I'm going to talk about today relates to my practice, but is something that I've been doing for the last year and a half. Because I got into crosswords. Well, it's not that I got into crosswords. I wanted to show this image because every summer, when I go back to Spain, where I'm originally from, I go to the beach, and my favorite thing to do, apart from being there with my family, is to get a book of crosswords, sit on the beach, and just solve crosswords. That is my happy place. And I've been doing that for many years. And I've been solving crosswords in Spanish for many years. And I can also solve crosswords in English, but one of the things that I came to realize is that, I was having trouble figuring out for example, the New York Times crossword, which I'm going to talk about quite a bit today, because it's its own kind of beast, so to speak. And the thing is that being able to solve word puzzles in two languages, not only crosswords, but I love word puzzles in Spanish and in English, and I can solve both. But crosswords were one of those things that in English was still a bit tricky. So I set out, a bit over a year and a half ago to get to doing the New York Times crossword every day and getting better and better at it and learning its conventions. Because really, one of the things that I want to get across today is that crosswords is not only about knowing words, it's also the cultural references, is what makes them a very special type of thinky game, so to speak. So what I want to talk about today is things that I've learned not only by solving puzzles, but actually, also by constructing them and building them and learning what the entrance to doing that were. Because as many of you probably already know, we can love thinky games, but there's a point where we also get into designing the thinking games, and designing a puzzle can be as much fun, if not more, than actually solving them. So this is kind of like an introduction to resources, to concepts that should help you understand how to construct your own puzzles. So you probably already know what a crossword puzzle is, right? We have the grid that has different squares, and in each square usually there's a letter. The white squares. Some grids might have syllables, for example. They might have, the black squares tells us where there's no letter. But, there might be some crosswords that don't have black squares. They might be blank, as we're going to see. So we have the grid, and then we have the clues. We have to give the solver the information to know what to put in the grid. Those are the two basic things to create a crossword, and each one takes different tools and different skills. They're different types of puzzles, so to speak. The pleasure of creating a crossword is to incrementally figure out the solutions. We have a word, and with the letters that we put in the grid, we already have letters that will let us know what the actual word would be in other definition, right? So we get like more and more information as we go. It gets a bit easier whenever we find a word, we have information for another one. But it's also incremental in the terms of the design, that in designing the grid and designing the clues, we have different types of strategies that will allow us to create a crossword. And again, this is very basic, so to speak. Maybe some of you are already designing crosswords. But one of the goals of this talk is basically getting people interested who might not have done this before, because one of the problems that we have in the crossword world is that we don't have enough women, we don't have enough people of color, for example, we don't have enough people with interesting lived experiences that can build crosswords, and because crosswords are also part of culture and sharing culture. So this is like the basic of what a crossword is. And then there's many different types of crosswords. Again, one of the things that I've learned by being someone who can solve crosswords in Spanish and in English is that the types of crosswords that I was solving in Spanish are different from the conventions of the crosswords that one solves, for example, in the UK, or that one might solve in the United States, right? And probably those of you who speak other languages and can solve crosswords in other languages might know that there's a whole variety of crosswords that we can tackle. I'm going to explain these from the easier type of crosswords to the most difficult ones. To begin with, I wanted to, and by the way, Wikipedia has a different kind of breakdown and classification. I'm kind of like going through milestones, but there are other ways to kind of classify crosswords. This is not quite a classification. This is more like an examination of different types. The first one is arrow word, which is also called Scandinavian crossword, because supposedly the original format was born in Scandinavia. In Spain, we call them autodefinidos. In France, they're called mot fléché. I'm sure that there's other names in other languages. And this is a grid where we have the definitions. They're very, very short. The clues are one word, 2, 3 words, not a lot because they're in the grid itself. If you can see it here, like you can see how that's where the clue is. And then there's an arrow, hence the name, that tells you which direction you have to write the word. This is extremely popular in Europe. This is like the casual type of crossword that I love solving at the beach, for example. So this is very accessible. This is very popular, and like it's very fast as well. Then we have the kind of classic American newspaper crosswords, and this is the kind of crossword that I've been learning a lot about in the last couple of years. The origins of crosswords, of modern crosswords as we understand it, come from a puzzle that Arthur Wine wrote for the New York World in December 21st, 1903. That's supposed to be the first crossword as we understand it. We've had word squares, for example, for centuries, like that was not new, but the grid with the numbers and the clues was something that was invented at the beginning of the 20th century. This convention, like this format, and specifically in American crosswords, we see how words have to have at least 3 letters, something that, for example, is not true of the arrow word. And we're going to see other formats where it's okay to have columns that are surrounded by black squares. And they're also symmetrical, where you have a bar here, you have another bar on the other side, right? So like you see how this is symmetrical, a rotational symmetry, right? And it's something that we can do with tools, as we're going to see. One of the things that took me a while to figure out how they work is this idea of the theme, because some of the kind of American classic puzzles have a theme that unites several of the clues. There might be one clue that is called the revealer. The revealer is the key that tells you what the theme might be. And then we have the clues that might be related to each other. They're usually marked in the clues with an asterisk, for example, or with italic words, italic form. And these are, for example, this is one of my favorite themes, because on the one hand, this is not a symmetrical grid. We have a grid that has the shape of a spiral. I love movies, and when I went to solve this and I saw the clue where the answer was dolly zoom. I was like, oh, this is Vertigo, and there it was. This was imitating the poster of Vertigo, so I was really excited about this. I really, really like this. But this is a crossword where the theme also is reflected in the shape. Last Thursday, the New York Times had one where the theme was a cocktail, and the crossword had the shape of a cocktail in the middle. So this is kind of like what a theme means. It's a bit tricky to figure out, how themes work until you've done quite a bit of these crosswords. And these crosswords, American crosswords, they appear in newspapers, one each day, and as you go, the crosswords get harder and harder. So the way that they can get harder, for example, is that the clues can get shorter, more ambiguous. They can be more than one thing. They can have more punning. They can have a bit of like cryptic clues, as we're going to see in a minute. And that's kind of like the model that newspaper crossword puzzles follow in the US. But the thing that is also very key of this kind of crossword is that they're trying to appeal to a wide audience, and the kinds of clues and the kinds of references that the words are referring to can have like references to current TV shows, sports. I hate when it's sports, like sports always lose me. Or ads, commercials, advertisements, like all of those can be clues because they're trying to cast a wide net and attract as many people from, I guess, many different backgrounds as possible. But the truth is that a lot of these crosswords, the audience tends to be very homogeneous and very kind of like American middle class white, at least here. And it would be very interesting to have this format to be appealing to more people than that, like all over the world. Then, this is the American crosswords. This is the British crossword. I have not tackled many of these. They scared me. Probably some of you watching or in the Discord are very adept at solving cryptic crosswords. I find them very scary. As you can see, this is the kind of British kind of typical crossword, or like not typical, but like it's more white standard, in that the crosswords have more of a lattice shape. So if you can see here, we have columns that alternate between black and white and black, which we couldn't see in the previous grids, right? So they're more of a lattice. Each clue is not only a clue, it's a word puzzle, and it's the information is encoded twice. I don't know how to explain it well. I'll give you an example in a second, because on the one hand, we might have the definition of what it is and how to read the clue. And there can be even more layers than that. There are some cryptic crosswords that might also include clues that are the key to certain clues, or even every clue in the crossword. They're super elaborate. They're super complicated. And again, this is something that I find, extra challenging. Again, I can solve crosswords in English, but the key is not just to know the language, is to know the conventions and the cultural references. So in order to explain what cryptic crosswords are, the best explanation that I found is actually by Stephen Sondheim, the musical composer and lyricist, who was also a Thinky Games super fan, and also constructed his own puzzles and published them in the New York Times as well. But he was a fan of cryptic crosswords. And this is how I explain how the clues work in cryptic crosswords. He said, the problem for the solver is that the words in a clue may, if taken literally, mean something quite different from their apparent meaning. Here's a clue, for example: stares at torn pages, 5. 5 is the number of letters in the convention of cryptic crosswords. Stares at torn pages may suggest at first glance some obscure term in bibliophilia. But what the phrase really means is a word meaning stares at, whose letters are those of pages out of their normal order. So that's how we decode the clue. How do we get to that conclusion? In however veiled a way, that is literally what it says. Stares at is a synonym for gapes. That's the solution. Torn in this context means separated with violence so that the parts are out of their normal order. So there are two separate and distinct references to gapes, one a definition and one an elliptical description of the way the word is formed. Your problem is merely to punctuate the clue in an odd way. Stares at torn pages. So this is why cryptic crosswords are an extra layer of complication. And again, probably for those of you, in the UK, in Ireland, and in other countries where cryptic crosswords are popular, you're used to this. But culturally, for me, this is like a barrier that I haven't got yet. But I'm reading up on it. It's very interesting, and I find it fascinating. Very quickly, I also want to go through other layouts that we can use in grids in crosswords. And these come from my collection of books of crosswords in Spanish because I love these. So we can have crosswords, like arrow words, for example, with syllables, but they can also be like regular crosswords where we can fit in a syllable instead of just a letter. Romance languages make it a lot easier to actually do this. We can have honeycomb layouts where, if you can see here in this honeycomb grid, we have the definitions are here, the clues are here, and the words are written in a line. But in this other example, we have a basic honeycomb shape. There's the clue in the middle in the black cell, and then there's a little arrow that tells you how to write the clue in which direction, where it starts, and in which direction to write it. These are like extremely satisfying, and they're like, it can be challenging, but they're really, really fun. They're also easier to do in Romance language, for example. And then there's white crosswords. I love these. Here you have the clues, you have the grid, no black squares, and the only thing that you have to go is telling you how many black squares there's going to be. And you have to figure out where they are. I find these like really fun, but it's also like something that might be easier depending on what kind of clues one writes. I find Spanish is particularly conducive to have grids like this and making them very accessible. And now, the main thing that I want to kind of talk about is like how to construct the grid. Again, we like Thinky games. We like thinking in puzzles. If we think in puzzles, making them is also not so far away. So one could start building a crosswords with, for example, Scrabble tiles. If you have a Scrabble set, if you like Thinky games, probably you already do. You can actually start doing it manually. Scrabble tiles, the points in each tile are also telling you how frequent or unfrequent a letter can be. So that can be very useful. And actually, you can buy online whole bags of these tiles because they sell them for crafts. So if you like the analog way, you can do that. You can also use pen and paper. That's something that I've used, to construct crosswords in Spanish myself, because that's kind of like the traditional way. But it turns out that we have a lot of grid construction tools that can make your lives so much easier. And this was for me the real epiphany, like, oh, I can use these tools. And basically, these tools help you as a constructor, a setter, as they call them in the UK, to create your crosswords very easily because they facilitate their formatting. You can have your grid and your clues appearing in a template in a very neat and clear way. So it's very easy to just write it out and print it out and give it away. There are tools that help you put in black squares if you need symmetry to make a crossword. The tools can help you just place the black squares in a symmetrical way. You can also write the clues, and it will match the number in the grid. You can number the clues. It does it all for you. It's really great. But the main thing that you need the tools for is that it really gives you different options of words and how they might fit a pattern. These tools have a dictionary. The dictionary can tell you, for example, how frequent or infrequent a word is by displaying a word score, as we're going to see. But because they have a database, it can already tell you which words might actually fit a specific pattern, and you already have, some other letters in place, and that is amazingly helpful. And also, tools make it very easy to share your crosswords. But the main thing that you want them for is having a dictionary, having tools that can help you visualize and kind of predict what kind of words we can put in. So very quickly, I've prepared a handout with a lot of these links. So at the end of the talk, I'm going to put it in the Discord and share it, so you don't have to start taking notes. Relax. The first tool that I used was Crossword, which is online and is free. And it has a decent dictionary, and it helps you basically come up with a grid, the size, and like write your clues, and as I said, anticipate what is going to happen. It's very good if you want to just like dabble and see how far you get. This was my hook. This was the point where like, oh, I really want to do more of this. Some of you might be familiar with PuzzleMe, probably because you're in the Thinky games community, where you can create your puzzles and put them online. It also has a pretty decent crossword maker that you can export, for example, to your blog and put in your puzzles. Crossfire is the tool that I'm using now because you can customize your dictionaries, and it's pretty powerful in making you come up with your own list of words and customizing them. It's available for Windows and Mac, but it's a paid app. It's not free. Same with Crossword Compiler. I don't use this tool. I'm a Mac person, but this is for Windows only. But again, these are professional grade tools. This is what professional puzzle constructors actually use. Again, I have a list of these that I'm going to post in the Discord at the end of the talk. But again, like the trick, and this was the big trick of how to build crosswords in English, but I'm sure that in other languages is very similar, is that dictionaries are really the main resource that you want. You want to have a large database of words that you can use, that the tools can help you navigate and select words that can fit the words that you are already in your crossword. Like for example, if you have a pattern that is like a letter U, Z, Z, and two other letters, like you can put that in and it will tell you different options that you could fit in a specific part of your crossword. There's databases online that can tell you how many times a word has appeared in a newspaper, for example. There's a huge database of like the New York Times and the LA Times, for example, and how it's being clued, which is going to be important in a second, as we're going to see. They can also tell you the score of a word, how common or uncommon is, because you want to find words that are accessible. They're not like too obscure, but they're you want to find words that people can guess. Although it's also fun to have words that might not have appeared, but that are becoming part of the popular vocabulary. So for example, techno bro, I was checking, has not appeared in the New York Times yet, but hate watch was actually has appeared 3 times by now in the New York Times crosswords. And all of these is in a database. So it's an amazing resource to know what's been done before, how a certain word might have been clued. Can you come up with a new way of cluing something? Again, this is a list of different databases where you can look up words and clues and patterns. Some of them, the ones that have premium access, they basically sell the database of words, for example. But you can actually get by and make your own crosswords with things that are free and online already. So, again, I'm going to share these in a second. And also, if you're a programmer, if you have a database, you can also write scripts to look for things in that database. For example, words containing certain letters, or like, can you find palindromes? I recommend Python. If anybody's learned Python here, the first thing that most Python courses out there will teach you is how to parse texts and databases. So you only need an introduction to Python to actually create one of these scripts. So like it would be like a good thing to look into. All of this provides it with really powerful tools to create your own crossword puzzles for others. And then there's the art of writing the clues. This is the part where I have fun, because as a game writer, somebody who's written the text for many adventure games, and a lot of what I did was cluing puzzles through part of the story and part of the world and part of the descriptions. This is the part that relates to something that I've done many times for many years. So this was the part that I have become like fascinated by, like, how is this different? What is the art of writing the clues? Because in general, you have to keep them short, you have to keep them snappy at times, because there might be not a lot of room to actually print out your clues. You have to let the solver know what they have to find, what is the word that they have to put in. Anyway, many of them, they're riddles. In the case of cryptic crosswords, they're like really elaborate riddles. But there's also some clues that require you to know specific information, like geographic names. That's something that Spanish crosswords love too much, and they give really obscure references to geography that I never know. Sports teams. I don't follow American sports on this, so whenever there's a sports team reference, I'm just like actually looking things up, like actually looking and Googling things, because I don't know any other teams, or very few teams. Slogans and things like those. So this kind of encyclopedic knowledge depends on somebody's education, the background, like what is it that they know? What is the groups that they hang out with? What are the things that they might know? There might be people who like sports, and the sports clues that stop me might be so easy for them, right? But they're also kind of like refer to trivia that is also very ephemeral and can date very fast. So how long do you want your crossword puzzle to be solved, right? Like to be available. But this is one of the keys here, that depending on what you're making references to, you can attract different audiences. You're appealing to the knowledge of different people, right? So this is where, like, knowing what is in the grid and how you're appealing to it. Maybe there's a like the same name, you might refer to a sports person or to a literary author, and that is appealing to different types of audiences and different types of knowledge and different types of backgrounds. And this is where crosswords can become kind of elite, for example. So, when we write the clues, there are times where, like, when we're building the grid, we might end up using what we call crosswordese. Like, there are words that we don't use in everyday life, but that appear in crosswords a lot. Oreo appears almost every day in American crosswords, and it's so difficult to clue it in original ways because it's been done to death. The Swiss River R also appears a lot. It appears a lot in Spanish crosswords, for example. It obscure geographical reference, but it fits grids very well. Same with épée, with the saber that one uses in the Olympics, right? All of these, if you do a lot of crosswords, you know them. They, not the case of Oreo, but like R, for example, is obscure. But if you do a bunch of crosswords, you know this, right? It comes up. The fun thing is writing a clue that obscures crosswordese and makes it fun when you realize, oh, it's Oreo again, right? There's also knowing the different conventions of each publisher. The New York Times, for example, they kind of have a clue that has where the word or part of the word of the solution appears in the clue. Whereas in Autodefinidos, the arrow words in Spanish, they will expect you to actually conjugate a verb and have the same word just with a different form. American crosswords can also include short phrases, like let me go. Whereas in Spanish, for example, we only have words. It's very, very weird that you would have an actual phrase, several words. And as we've seen, cryptic crosswords have their own world of writing the clues. And I'm going to wrap up, I only have a couple more slides. Then you can share your crossword. You can print it out as a PDF if you use the tools. In blank with the clues is very neat. It's really great. You can post it on your website if you use something like PuzzleMe. You can also export it to a Crosslight, which is an app that works in Windows and Mac, but it can also be run in iPad. And it's a file that you can open. It's like a document file that you can open and solve any crossword as if it was, like a crossword for the New York Times, the LA Times, or one of those. And you can share the file. It's a standard crossword format. And you can also connect with other Crosswords fans in the Crossword. They're mostly North American, but it is a place where you can find people who are fans, people who are constructors, people who are willing to mentor you and test your puzzles. So I have here a bunch of other reading that I can recommend, from articles that deal with solving other puzzles, like how to construct puzzles, but also the history of puzzles, the history of cryptic crosswords, the history of crosswords themselves, and also the last title, The Riddles of the Sphinx, is a feminist history of crossword constructors, which is very interesting. But again, I'm going to share this in a minute. And that's all I have to say for today. Thank you very much for your attention. This is my fun Thinky game obsession, and I hope that this has inspired you first to maybe solve crosswords, but also to maybe start building your own. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clara. That was wonderful. Wonderful talk. It was great to see so many different examples of crosswords and all the different tools that are available. It's that kind of stuff that, unless you're in it, it's hard to know about all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you.